go. As usual, I shall wait a little bit before we get started, just to simply let some of the adverts pass, because I know some of you will not have a choice in the matter and you'll have to watch them. Anyway, good evening. It is OLC CodeZone number 49. Tile sources and the mega macro, because I'm going to talk you through a story, a journey that I have been on this week. And it's horrific and scary in many, many ways. So we've got Standard in, hello, and we've got Holy Seraphim on, Alter Ego, hello. Alter, did you sign up with another Twitch account during the week? I'm just curious because somebody followed me with the name Alter Ego. Taper, sorry Taper, you are not first, not by at least 17 minutes. Oh dear. But thank you anyway. You don't win the first prize today. So, where are we? Yes, let's have a look. I'm going to try and actually get some code done today. Oh, first time chat, B4141. Hello, hello, good. So as we can see, here is the application. And it doesn't look, on the surface at least, to be very, very different. But lots and lots of changes. Decided to put my serious dev hat on and do a bit of refactoring work in the background, just to make life a bit easier in the long run. Fundamental functionality, not much different. However, we have got sort of now the asset pack. So let's say, I can give you an example. I should be able, he says these things doing live demos that he's not tested. I should be able to go to add image pack, yep. And it's created another asset pack, which we can rename and fill with assets whilst keeping the first one separate. So that's the first sort of major change. Before, all of the assets were sort of lumped into one global pod of data. But that's not the case now. So the asset packs are individually accessible. Secondly, you may start to see I've got some properties appearing down here in this window. And that's quite an important thing, because that really has been the entire week of any coding time I've spent working on this damn properties window, and I hate it. I hate WX widgets for doing properties this way. And it's not very often I have a strong opinion about coding, but I hate this properties window. Hate it. Right. Who have we got in the chat? I heard we'll do dark mode today. Oh, you're in for a shock. No, afraid we don't do dark mode at all. Speedy's here. Hello, Speedy. Hey. Infinite Coder. Hello. Seago Nitori. Hello. Rosso, the serious dev hat, the fedora. I just stroke my neck in between my beard. Right, why has this particular window been a problem? Well, we'll go on a bit of a journey to get there, but what I wanted to try and achieve was, we mentioned at the end of last week that we would potentially have, oh, thank you, Zals, for the follow there, appreciate that. I like that the value column is still called test in the properties. Well, it's because the asset pack is called test, right? So the reason this has been fun and games, I thought we would have an asset selection dialog, and I talked about that in the last window. And what I wanted was a properties window like this. I'm pointing at the screen, obviously you can't see that, but and the idea is that you can select the properties window, and you can either type in the sort of internal path to the particular asset, or you can press this button and it brings up our little dialog that we did sort of talk about at the end of last episode. And you can select the particular asset pack that's coming from, and you can select specifically an asset. Double click it, and it creates this this path. So all the paths are sort of the name of the asset pack. I know appreciate it's a bit fiddly to see, but it's the name of the asset pack, colon, pic_t.png. It's the friendly names of both. And if I expand this asset pack, you get to see the asset pack ID is the name test and the asset ID. And you can change these and it will automatically sort of refactor that string. That's all great. So that's all working now. But the journey to get there has been one of horror and shame. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the reason I want to use this properties window is properties windows are actually really, really quite useful. This is a properties window here on the right-hand side. Zals, good evening. Hello. Is there a story behind J in Javid X9? We see the OLC lore is in well effect there. So this is a property window, and it's quite a useful thing. So you can throw all sorts of data in it and give people user-friendly, accessible ways of working with that information. For example, this is a string property up here, and this is a file property. And for a file property, I can click on the file. It opens the file window and does what you'd expect it to do. This is a color property. I can select from ready-made colors, or I can go in and create something custom. These are sort of conventional user interface things that are useful. We've got checkbox properties. They're all sort of validated as well. So you can't enter invalid information. One of the things I quite like are these sort of groupings of properties, which is great for coordinate systems. So I can type into here, I can type in 600, for example, and it becomes live. Or I can type in, just nudge my microphone, I can type in at the same time 56,78. And it will automatically go and populate those things. This is all handled by the WXWidget subsystem. And yes, I can group it, and I can color it, and I can do help text here at the bottom floating around. It's a useful, convenient tool to have. It turns out, however, that actually customizing any of this beyond the very limited number of properties it can provide it does require you to do a journey to the dark side, the forbidden land of C++. And for lots of horrible reasons. Evening, Voxel. Nice to see you too. But before we get there, I wanted to sort of talk about the overall framework. We can have that as a bit of a story when we finish the video, because I got my graphics tablet working, which is very good. So void start everywhere, even worse. Standard, even worse. Yeah, it goes that bad. Hello, sir, Jajalis. Jajalis. Yes. Right, where am I looking? So, some code. Let's have a look at... Right, so the first thing I wanted to sort of show off today, a bit of a progress, what I've been doing, complete refactor of absolutely everything. So you can start to see the project's becoming a bit large. I'll get rid of that, and I'll get rid of that. I've started to group things into useful things. GUI components we're not interested in today. But fundamentally, the major change is this work object, which I briefly touched on, but I ran out of workspace. My graphics tablet stopped working, so I couldn't sort of sketch out what I had in mind and what these things should be capable of doing. And it turned out that originally my thought was to have work object as some sort of separated class from the GUI, and that makes a lot of interesting sense until you start wanting to work with sort of the major power of the work object, and that is everything in my editor is a work object, and everything will have accessible changeable properties all displaying in that property window. So that's a really critical path through this application. Good evening, Megetsub. You're late. And evening, Bixie. Hello, Bixie. Oh, I was thinking, should we reveal the theme tune at the moment? But no, we'll wait until it's finished. So I'm going to pull up OneNote and make sure things are still. Oof! Look at that, dazzled everybody. So is the graphics tablet still working? Hello. Yes, it is. Oh, this is very nice. Hello, the graphics tablet works. You don't often see me writing in cursive, do you? Yeah. Very good. You could tease the forbidden version. Is the forbidden version the 8-bit version? Because I was playing that in the office today, and people were people were enjoying it. You'd love to hear some singing. No, I'm not singing anything. What was the issue last time exactly? Was the software? Yeah, it was drivers. Yeah, purely drivers. There'd been some sort of Windows update, which just knocked it out, and it actually caused hardware failure on the graphics. So there's a little LCD display on my tablet, and that was all corrupted too. So a real problem. Yeah, graphics tablet's still working. The first one with the Mega Man theme. Let's have a look. Let's see if I can find. This is where I immediately get dismissed off Twitch. Let's have a look. So I have to pick. Okay, I'm going to play this one. So this was this is one of the first thoughts for how we're going to take on. I'm hoping I'm going to play the right one. Let's see if this works. Can you hear that? I thought this was a bit too cheeky, Bixby. Well, I hope you all heard that. So, anyway, it's a work in progress. We're not going to just directly rip off Mega Man. But I thought, yeah, it was a very good track. But we'll save the final one for when it's ready. We don't. I'm not going to play it again. Every time I play that, Nintendo gets an extra £1 or another lawyer to send my way. Anyway, what are we doing? So fundamentally, everything is going to be this work object class. Now, I've sort of abbreviated that to work object. And really, a work object is just a way to have the stuff in the GUI linked together. So we've seen so far, in fact, I've already forgotten what properties I've got. Let's just pull this one up. So we've seen, so hang on, why am I not clicking? Oh, because I've still got the pen on the thing. That's no good, is it? We've seen so far that the work object was responsible for serialization and property stuff. So let's just draw that in, doodle that in. So we know that we could serialize from a file. I've probably spelled that wrong. It's definitely spelled with a UKS at the end. So serialize in and out. It's also responsible for having properties, which is what we're really going to be talking about in this episode. Properties. That's a fun E, that one, isn't it? Look at that. A bit carried away. I need some practice at writing again. It's been some time. But also, work objects they tend to be the things that the user is operating upon. So different types of work objects that we've got. So we've got the project itself is a work object. That's the workspace. We're going to have asset packs. That's a work object. Other things that might be included in here. We've got tile maps. Vector artworks. We may also have things like tile sources, which is actually what we wanted to be sort of programming at the moment. And we'll get there, we'll get there. And basically, anything we can think of that sort of a 2D editor might want to allow us to edit. Now, we've talked about layered constructions and things in one of the previous episodes. So there's all sorts of things that are work objects. And it's convenient that the GUI can sort of access all of those properties in a uniform way and exchange the user changing those properties with the work object itself. So the fact that this is all common and this is all common is great, but there's one other major factor. And this is where I think we're going to sort of distinguish ourselves from other editors that are quite similar. Remember, it's not a competition, but there are some features that I think I'd like to include. So where are we going to be a bit different? I need some space to put a squiggle. Is I want all of the work objects to be custom exportable. And this for me is really where the power of this tool is going to be. So there's going to be a common interface that allows us to basically load up some sort of external script, and that external script has a defined way of talking with this work object, and we can export things in any way that we like. For example, I currently have an asset pack, which we've seen, and the asset pack consists of many different assets, and each one of those assets consists of a file path, and a file, and a friendly name. Let's call it friendly name. Friend. Maybe. I'm half asleep today. File path and a friendly name. Now, the default way that everything is stored in the OLC editor, if I just pull up this one, is using my OLC data format. So here we can see. So one potential export option would be to simply export the asset pack in the OLC data format. That's fine. That's one option. This is a big data pack that's got all of those assets that we saw loaded up before. There we go. But what if we wanted to, instead of going to OLC format, what if we wanted to export it directly as C++ code? So we can just cut and paste it into our project. What if we wanted to export it directly as a header file? So you can just include it as an asset resource. What if we wanted to export it directly as a JSON object? What if we wanted to export it in Rust? I mean, yeah, at least somebody must program in Rust, right? But what if we wanted to export it in some sort of binary data? The idea being the editing of the tool, so the editing provided by the tool is sort of the common feature, but we can use the output of this tool very easily in lots of other platforms. Let me just catch up with some of these pings. Johnny, hello. Yes, long time listener, first time caller. Anybody that's interested, Johnny G63 has taken on the rather sort of masochistic task of creating the Pixel game engine for iOS and Android in an almost directly compatible way. It's quite an intensive header file. It also fully exploits sort of the SIMD properties available on the different chipsets of those devices. It's quite a project, this. And it'll be fun once it's sort of officially released by Johnny. Then it'll be fun to start giving it a go. Yeah, so the idea being, I'm good. I'm pleased that not everybody's run off saying, "Oh, that's rubbish." What I kind of expect is when we export, we'll basically probably have a Lua script, because I quite like Lua and it's reasonably accessible, and there'll be a dialog that pops up, shows all of the available Lua scripts, perhaps also displays a preview of what the output data will look like, and off it goes. And we can collect these Lua scripts as the community starts to develop things, and it won't be like loads of people doing this, but you never know. Different custom engines, maybe some interoperability with the other types of editors that are out there. And we can do this for everything that is a work object. So what I'm anticipating is before long, we'll have another set of virtual base methods here that will need implementing. We probably do need a flag for something that says this work object can't really be exported. I'm sure there'll be work objects that don't make any sense to export. There's also simpler things too. So we're talking very much about tile maps, and so that's because it's a tangible example we can all sort of understand. But it could also just simply be arrays of data. So one of the things my editor will allow me to do is create maps of booleans or maps of floating point values. And from there you can start to see, well, then we might need some height map editing tools or something like that. So it will grow and grow and grow. And for me, I just want to collect it all in one place so I don't have to keep programming these things. Is there a Rust port of PG2? There is actually. I don't know if it does the decal stuff. There was a fairly popular web dev was experimenting with it. He's the author behind TL Draw. I don't know if any of you use that tool. He was experimenting with creating some sort of gesture controls and some polygon stuff using the Rust version of PG. He's been on the server a couple of times too. Is it linked on the GitHub? I don't know. I think it's called Rusty Pixel Game Engine, something like that. It's probably a little out of date, as are most of the ports, because they're nothing to do with me. The community are great. They take them on and do them for themselves. Right. So that's the fundamental essence of work objects. So you can start to see I'm collecting some work objects here. So my most basic type of work object, I guess, is the image asset. Now, the images are now responsible for loading and erasing themselves and looking after themselves. Then we've got an asset pack, which is basically a collection of those images. I kind of felt that it was necessary to put these into packs, in case you wanted to just sort of have them as a library of ready-to-go things. That's quite useful. I've still not yet fully decided on how we sort of link the assets to the things that we're drawing. In the editor, I think it's all going to be done via friendly names and liberal use of maps. But in reality, for the end user, they don't want that. So it's probably necessary to export some additional meta information, which is literally linking numbers to numbers, some very fast form of indexing, so you can get to the graphic that you need. Alex, hello, good evening. Static tile source is the one that we keep threatening to start working on, but then it was this that prompted the need for getting the properties working. So far, the image assets and asset packs, other than the name, there's nothing really to change on them. But what I wanted to try and do was overlay a grid. So let's make sure the application is running. If I just find where's the image viewer, there we go. So I started work on a tool which was derived from Navigable. I keep knocking my boom microphone. Sorry, it's got a big cable sticking out. Called a grid view. And this is we're seeing the power of polymorphism. Hopefully I shouldn't have to change anything else now, he says bravely. So anywhere that we were viewing an image before is now going to use this grid view control. And a grid view control puts a grid on things and starts to handle the mouse. Just wait for that to compile. Has to do a bit of a big compile because I don't think I've compiled it properly for a while, but I've been poking around with all of the files just getting ready for this video. It also turns out that for some reason Visual Studio doesn't seem anymore, for me, doesn't recognize that it's already built something after you've started it up. It always assumes that the debug information, all that sort of intermediary information, is somehow out of date just by restarting Visual Studio. Don't know, maybe just hopefully a passing phase, but it seems to be doing it for me. Right, so if I launch the application now. Oh, did we get an error? Yes, we did. We got an error. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Bugs. Bugs. Grid view. No appropriate default constructor available. Oh, what did I change? What did I change? Oh, no. Oh, it's because that's also a grid view. Because it's not just inheriting from panel anymore. Big compiles aren't any fun. Yeah. Well, when we get to sort of the tail end of today, we're going to have a look at what is the mega macro and understand why. Basically, I've just been crying all week every time I sat down to code. So there we go. Our image view has now changed into a grid view. Look at that. The power of polymorphism. Everything else should be the same. In fact, if I go and open one of our existing workspaces, so let's open that test one. This is the one with all of those assets in, so it takes a moment to load them. You can see down here, oh, maybe you can't, just behind the chat, so it's loading all of the asset pack stuff. When we go to assets, and bring up the asset pack, open it and select an asset. There we go. Grid view. And I was experimenting with some grid properties, but I need to be able to set various things about this grid. I need to set the dimensions of the cells. I need to set how many cells there are. What if you did have a genuine sort of tile map thing? Let's have a look. Let's find one of those. So if I go to here, assets, and let's go for this one. And clearly, this is a tile. It's meant to be some sort of selectable grid going on in the background. But this requires some properties. And here we are. Now we're at this stage where in order to actually specify these grid dimensions, I need to be able to sort of interact in a fluid way rather than hard coding everything, and then save that information for next time when we're rendering and doing the selection. And the nice thing about, because we've used this navigable panel I talked about in the first episode, we can actually rotate this and it doesn't affect any of the selection tools, which I think is really quite neat. Why you'd want to rotate your gridded stuff, I don't know, but maybe it's useful. So that's why we needed some custom properties going on here. Let's close that down. Now, in mainframe, is there anything more to mention about the work objects before I carry on? Right, the only other difference you might have seen, I've added a tree to the top corner. Let me just catch up with a few of these things. It suffers from growing pains. Possibly, yeah. It tends to be pretty stable, but yeah, it could be. Yeah, Bob Morris. Anybody that's curious about that, Morris is doing some painting. I guess he's doing some Bob Ross speedrunning of his own. Are you using sort of a digital board for these paints, or is it actually paint? I know that sounds like a ridiculous question. I'm fairly certain it's digital, but the application seems to do it quite well. But I was wondering, do you get that sort of plasticky sheen because of your color selections, or because the blend mode isn't quite right for how the paint should actually blend on paper? And that's probably settable. Voxel's been building a desktop application. Compile times are really what are hurting my time. Yeah. Yeah, it can be a bit of a pain if it needs to do a full recompile. Also, as C++ and my stuff, but I think on the whole it's becoming more popular as everything's gravitating towards these single header files. I think that's doing no favors for compile times, particularly when everything's stuffed full of templates. And ironically, I'll counteract that in a minute. But it may be an argument to say that actually pre-compiled headers are some necessary evil that we may have to start exploring. If particularly we're doing some live coding and we want to do a significant change to a base object, then everything has to be recompiled. Okay, somebody's rolling some maximum powers of 2. I really work with Flutter nowadays. Oh, thank you, Voxel. Well, that's very good. If your compiler only needs to recognize the token A and then output hello world, yeah, I'm sure it compiles very, very quickly. Yeah, I don't think Bob Ross had Critter in mind when he was doing his painting. Right, so where am I looking for? So we were looking in the main thing. We looked at last time, I'm going to recall, we were looking at opening and closing the workspaces and how we linked all of that together. So the only real difference that I've added is this selectability in the tree. So we have this construct workspace tree. Now, everything that we sort of add in that's a major feature, a major sort of work object classification, will get its own sort of semi-root in this tree. And so here I'm just simply iterating through all of the asset packs, for example, and adding those to the tree. And I add a special link to that asset pack when I'm putting it in the tree, which allows me to discover which asset pack was actually clicked on later on. So let's find the function where I'm actually dealing with the trees. Workspace closed. Oh, it's not up there. Where's this one? On... Where am I dealing with the tree? What did I call it? Oh, on select work object. There we go. So we had on select work object, which was just highlighting it, and then we also had another one, which was on view. Sorry, on view work object was just highlighting it. On select work object happens when you double click the object. So selecting the work object on the left hand side will change the properties, or that's the intention later on. And forcing the, it might be the other way around. Yes, sorry, I've got this the wrong way around. View work object launches something. There we are. So in this case, we've got a specific editor for the asset packs, which we've seen, this asset manager. It was called an asset manager, now it's not anymore. It's asset pack stuff. So it launches a specific editor by taking in that information and linking to it. Now, I like doing things this way because it means if I change something, I can open the same asset pack several times, and if I change it in one, that change then sort of automatically propagates to all of the other instances where that is. It's one of the advantages of using shared variables everywhere, sorry, shared pointers everywhere. When we just want to select the object, which also always happens before you double click, so this function and then the other function will get called. In this case, we want to populate the properties. And so we can get down to the bottom here and we can say, look, the selected work object, it's a shared pointer, we lock it, and we can call on that work object populate properties and give it some parameters to access things that it might need to do that. And if we go and have a look at the asset pack property implementation, we've got this, there we are, on populate property grid function. And here we've got the property grid itself, and we can append to it all of these WX widgets sort of thing. So we've got a string property and a file property. And in the middle here, you'll see we've got this asset property. So this is a custom one that I've created that allows us to do this sort of fun linking with the property items in the tree. Link to system, this is a little test as I was putting in, because in order for my dialog to pop up and display the assets, it needs the graphics context, it needs the OpenGL space, it also needs access to the workspace to see this information. So that was basically, it's global variables hidden through a function. Right, let's have a quick glug of water. Hang on. Now, I thought, oh, this will be dead easy. We just want to create some custom properties of our own. And so this is where my journey began. I did this. So I created a file called GUI props. I'd seen some example code somewhere of how to implement, for example, the point property. So if I pull up this as an example, anything that's like a two-dimensional integer coordinate is this WX point property or a WX size property. How was that implemented? So it's got these two children, X and Y. Well, it turns out that you start having to enter the world of, well, variants, macros, and reflection. And it's all utterly pointless, but it's got its place in history, I suppose. WX Widgets has been around for some time, and I like it. I'm not going to abandon it, but some of its design is a little old-fashioned now. You start to see weird things like this happening inside the class. What's going on here? Everything in a WX Widgets property window relies on this variant type. Now, I discussed in the last episode that I don't necessarily feel variant is particularly useful in C++. It's a computer science curiosity. It's an intellectual puzzle where you can basically have sort of any type of data and have your program work. I've been taught and brought up when I've been programming with these languages that, well, basically you should always know what your types are in this instance. There's no reason not to. And any sort of interaction with the outside world doesn't actually call for ever sort of having these dynamic typing systems. There's a lot of debate and argument about that. I'm sure everybody has their own feelings on it. But I kind of feel, well, in the outside world, you've got integers, real numbers, and strings. And that's how you should treat them. When you bring them into your program, you shouldn't need to also bring in external type information. There are cases where it's necessary. So there are also like communications cases and perhaps some sort of debugging cases and some like sniffer cases, that sort of thing, where you might want that flexibility. But I often think that actually it's an old-fashioned way of doing something that now things like templates and stuff can handle for you. And indeed, the variant and the first problem, its successor WXAny are indeed basically some template magic to try and start to tidy these things up. Oh, Nightlight90, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Standard variant is nothing like WX variant. No, WX variant is WX variant presumably started life probably back in the day, I'm talking maybe 2007, 2008, if not a bit earlier. And it's used as a way of just basically having any information. And I guess from a broad perspective, that makes sense. Your properties can be floats, ints, doubles, booleans, whatever. But where it falls down is that you actually have to do a class where this property is, if it's an integer property, so it's never actually a variant. This is just to handle some base class somewhere talking about the information. I think there's probably more elegant ways to do it than this. However, so I wanted to create my own, and the first one I thought, well, I could create one for point, because believe it or not, even though Form Builder here, this tool is written in WX Widgets, this particular property type isn't part of WX Widgets. You have to add that yourself. It's just not there. It should be, but it just isn't. So I thought, well, I'll have a crack at that first. And so the first thing is, okay, you look at some code, find some code online, and you start trying to just copy it. And I did. I found some good code. I copied the link somewhere. So this is some code that tells you how to do some sample properties. I mean, 2006, right? So we're going back a fair bit here, how to do it. So there's no modern anything going on. And then you start to look at, well, what's going on? So I was coding this up. I copied the child changed and refreshed children functions and said, okay, I understand what's going on there. So we can actually look at the implementation for some of these. GUI props CPP. Right. And we'll come back to all this at the top in a minute. But so you just it's so far so good, right? It's polymorphism. You create your class, you add these childs. So that's the X and the Y components of the property that we saw on the screen, and you can you can get to this value here. This M value is a protected variable within the class hierarchy. It's a variant, so you can sort of cast it to the different things that you need it to be, in theory. And you can then set its values. And so far, okay, yeah, that's logical. It all makes sense. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll be really smart, and I'll implement one for OLC VI2D, thinking this is going to be just the same. Right, well, the first thing is all of this falls apart as soon as you introduce namespaces into the equation. So I've created this type def up here really just to get rid of this namespace, and that way everything can work. I was thinking, well, why is that? Why is this all falling apart? I'm aware there's macros here, I'm aware there's stuff going on, and it's because they've got a very sneaky trick, which really caught me out. When I was looking at the point method here, I saw that there's wx point ref from variant function. I looked and go, oh, right, okay, it's a function there. It's going to create a reference to a wx point. Look at that. It's all sort of defined from the variant. That's really convenient. I'll look at that code and create one for my own type, OLC VI2D. I'm sure it's going to be very, very similar. So you right click on it as you do, and you go to peak definition, and it just pops up to a macro. And I was thinking, well, what's going on here? Right? It turns out that this macro, when you start digging into it, is a macro that calls other macros, and well, yeah, you're starting to see for yourself. This is how you did templates before you had templates, and it constructs this rather elaborate data structure in order to start making this work. Now you can see good. I'm glad that people here in the comments are starting to appreciate the beauty of what is on the screen right now. So not only is it a massive macro, it's a massive macro that also contains templates. So deep. I mean, this is great. If you're not familiar with that sort of syntax, right here. With the double hash in the middle of your two macros. So you can see here we've got the class name going in as a parameter of the macro. The class name hash hash. String concatenates the word the with that word the. So this is creating a function. So I pass in wx point here. So this is where wx point ref from variant gets created. It's not abuse. This is how you had to do stuff, right? It's just, you got to remember, it's a bit old-fashioned. And there are some hints to it in the code, but there's just all of these like really bizarre things that become a byproduct of this. Like I thought these were quite curious, and maybe the chat here can illuminate me as to why this is in fact even necessary. So they have this wx variant macro, which doesn't do anything. I'm guessing it's to give them some scope to do something, but it doesn't. Anyway, they didn't have one for wx point, which is one of their own fundamental built-in types in the library. So I had to go away and create one by copying and pasting code all over the place. So at the top of my file, you can start to see now I've got this one here, which is real point. So they have wx point and wx real point. This is you can see the Visual Studio expander here, telling you what it creates. And if you didn't know, you can actually get it to expand it in line. Yeah, so that's all the guff that gets created. There's file names in there and all sorts when you expand this. Oh, I have to Control and Z my way out of that. Long story short, once I'd sort of realised this is how it's being constructed, then, okay, your brain sort of clicks into gear and goes, right, don't try and be clever here. Just work out the very bare minimum for what you need to get the job done. And so I ended up, by defining that type def for my vector type up here, then it did actually sort of all click and work. So, kudos to the original developer. It did work. It did not work when I tried to put in another namespace in there. So right, I think we're live again. There we go. We should be back. I'll hold on just for a second, just in case his ad's playing. I don't know at what point it cut off, but So I'll carry on telling my story. I'll just wait until some of the ads are gone. I don't know what that was. I think it was on. Quite honestly, I think it was just Twitch saying, "No, you've stopped now." Maybe Bixie, they're on to us. They're on to us. I blame Bixie. I blame Bixie. Right. So yeah, so I'm getting some bitrate warning on Twitch, but the bitrate going out is actually just fine. No, I think we've gone again. So is it still streaming? Is it still live? Because everything... Yeah, okay. Well, see, what's interesting is my Twitch preview is offline. So I don't know if I'm live. That's very crazy, isn't it? Anyway, everything looks okay. So I'll carry on and we'll try and just keep it going. I'm going to have to glue these videos together now for when I put it back up. I know, web devs, sort your stuff out. Well, I thought I would be clever and sort of template the whole property, because I had my OLC VF2D class and my OLC VI2D class, and I thought, well, let's try and create a template of this, and it just all fell apart. I just couldn't. I didn't even understand some of the error messages. There was thousands of them. Just everything that could go wrong was going on. I was getting errors popping up in other parts of the project. I just thought, you know what, it's not worth it. So for the time being, I'm going to have two different types of property. That's okay, because I was sent at the start in C++. I believe you know what your types are, and you should know what your types are at all times. So there shouldn't be any need for sort of clever specializations like that. We'll be fine. Yeah. So sorry about the disconnect there. I really don't know. Yeah, don't know what's going on. That's OBS is telling me everything's fine, and the Twitch sort of what do they call it, ingestion server or something, is telling me everything's fine. So it must be just something doing with the output. So I created a property for basically the basic vector type. And then I thought, right, okay, well, now I know I'm a pro now. Now I know what I'm doing with these properties. Let's create one for this asset. Thinking, oh, it's going to be this. What's the difference? I've got an asset pack and an asset ID. It's two properties. I could, in fact, use an OLC VI2D type, right? Two integers, just linking that information. No, because it turns out, if you want this special little button, let's find a thing here. We click on here. You want this little button to pop up, and I could not find anything that told me how this button. So this is why file exists here, because I was thinking, what's file doing? You click on the thing and it pops up the asset browser. It's what you want. And you click on this. I just could not make it pop up at all. I got the children working. I got the string handling working. I just couldn't work it out at all. And that's because there's basically no documentation on any of this. And I was tired. It was late. Cutting and pasting code everywhere didn't start to work in sort of my favor. And it turns out there's some very subtle differences. As part of WXWidget's built-in internal reflection capabilities, which it uses to actually handle all of the WX variants. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. It uses this WImplement property class. So for the integer stuff, fine. I was just sort of blindly copying these things around. Okay, go and do whatever you need to do. It's doing all of this sort of type manipulation as another part of the mega macro. What I hadn't realized is that actually for the little button to pop up, there's a special one called text control and button. Which even Visual Studio doesn't know what it is. You can't even put your cursor over it and see anything. It just pops up as white text. It doesn't even know how to understand that. So I discovered. I mean, yes, the naming was at least good, right? Anyway, we got there. I got there in the end, and it turns out actually again, once you sort of get past that barrier of navigating a horrific code base, actually using it wasn't too bad. I still don't like the variant stuff, but at least now if we do need to add custom properties, I'm in a position where I can happily do so. So let me just catch up with some of the chat. Sorry about the disconnects. I genuinely don't know what's going on there. It says at the bottom of my screen, the stream quality is excellent and I am live, but the actual the preview is the holding screen. Right, so there we go. The mega macro. I thought it was worth showing with you. It's a throwback to a bygone era when you know, if somebody decided today to go ahead and rewrite WX widgets using sort of modern conventions, I think you could do a very good job of it and try and avoid it looking like Windows RT and WinGUI 3 and all that sort of nonsense. I mean, that's really horrific stuff. That is not the way forward at all. But even if they could do it, it occurred to me they'd be presented with a problem. All they would be doing is wrapping that WinRT and WinGUI 3 nonsense, and then whatever the modern alternatives are on Linux and Mac. And so perhaps a lot of WX widgets as we understand it now just simply wouldn't function because it kind of relies on how the GUI libraries worked 20 years ago. Now, nowadays, it's all specify something using an XML script, and it gets rendered like a bit of a web page, and the C++ stuff links into things that some other rendering subsystem is doing, some part of some GDI thing somewhere. And maybe that is the way forward, but at least present it in a sensible way. I know I've not really shown WX widgets in a good light here, but everything else that I'm doing with it, I mean, literally everything else, the whole application so far, I mean, all of this is basically drag and drop to construct, and actually then linking things into place and doing shortcuts. And it's just so easy. There's no fuss there at all. So I don't, you know, I've had to dig into a particularly weird and esoteric part of the WX widgets library to achieve what I want. But you know, for an everyday little buttons and text boxes, it's still perfectly fine. But it's a shame that it's probably going to sort of start to see the end of its life, I imagine, simply because the GUI technologies upon which this is founded are changing. OLC widgets. Yeah, that's exactly. Everything's got to be a browser. Yeah, keep your filthy web away from my GUI. It does make me think, you know, if I was motivated enough, you could now do a GUI framework using something like Pixel Game Engine. I know we've done this before. We've made toy examples and Windows potting around. But if you did something that actually reflected sort of some more modern aesthetics, did native resolution, that sort of thing, you could provide a cross-platform GUI interface. I'm sure this is how some of them are already doing it anyway. But unfortunately for all of you, I'm not motivated enough to do that. No, Magetsa, no. ECS basically, it's just words now. It's not good. ECS, bad. Right. So with that, the next thing to start working on was this static tile source. Right. So what is a static tile source? Well, let's pop up some OneNote. The static tile source, if we're going to have a map of tiles somewhere, so we're starting off, remember, this is just general 2D, but we're going to make an assumption that we're going to have something that is a layered construct, and that layered construct consists of regularly spaced things on a grid. I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that actually being locked to grids is actually the fundamental underlying tenet of how this software is going to function. And yeah, word salad. I think it's a good phrase there. So it's, you know, obviously a grid is a fairly easy construct in computing. It's a 2D array, whatever. It doesn't matter. But what are we actually going to put into these grids? So I was thinking if we had something like a tile map or a tile atlas, that tile atlas itself is a grid with a specified grid over some underlying image. So that image may have some tiles here, and it may have a different tile here, and it might whatever. And so we needed to create a way to represent what is that tile. What is that tile and where does it exist? Now, I'm going to assume for our very basic, simple static tile maps, now we may have some more advanced structures in the future, but for a very basic one like this, that we reference that particular tile with the atlas name, which is our, with our asset pack name. So we'll have our pack. No, I'm doing this wrong. Yeah, atlas name, because the atlas will only consist of one image, and that one image will be referenced through the asset pack and the ID. So I was thinking atlas followed by, what do we think? Do we want a single 1D index to give us the tile, or should we have ID, or should we have pos to give us an XY offset to that particular spacing? What do you think? I'm tempted to go with this at the moment, but the problem is, if you wanted to sort of refactor your maps and things later on, maybe that's a little fiddlier to work with. So first things first, we just basically need to create a new editor which allows us to select a background image and then apply a grid on top of it. And once we've got that grid, we can then look at how we can form selections in here. So we can select multiple cells, perhaps in different locations, and paste them, or draw them, or paint them, or flood fill them, whatever, into our layered construct. And I think that's what we'll have a crack at starting to code. So I've got my basic static tile source. Static tile source by means of, firstly, the tiles, they're regularly spaced, but there's no animation or anything like that. It purely is dumb. It's just going to cut out of a single image a particular tile. Right, so I've got my static source work object. There's a few things then I start needing to add. My current workspace has no knowledge at all of a static tile source, so I think that's the first thing to start adding in. The workspace itself contains a collection of vectors. Now, I've deliberately sort of made these accessible. I don't want to make life difficult for myself. So we'll have another one, standard vector, of standard shared pointer. I did talk about why am I sort of preferring shared pointer in this instance, and it's because I quite like weak pointer as a concept. So static, I probably need to actually go and include the header file, don't I? Oh, I have done. Static tile source. Vec will have, so yeah, we'll just call it vec, static tile source. Because I think we'll probably end up with maybe 10, 15 different things in this tree. It depends on what tools you're going to be using them for. And I'm happy for it to be that way. Maybe we'll tidy that up somehow later on, but right now I'm just going to have these as separate things. If it's static, that means it's not an instance variable, right? No, static in this case, it's no, the data's not static. It's functionally a static thing. The imagery is not moving. It's not an animated tile source image. It's purely just a simple image. Hello, Eustace. I've missed a few. I know Technica. Yeah. Yeah, I know. We're actually trying to write some code. Who knew? Who knew this would happen? We'll tell you what. Whilst should we have the theme tune again, or the theme tune work in progress? This is why Twitch collapsed before, by the way, because Bixie helped me violate many different rights. So far it's looking a bit like this. You ready? Speakers on, guys. But we're not going to rip this bit off. So we say it's a shame we can't keep the Mega Man bit. I think what we've got so far, though, Pixie, I think it's sort of heading in the right direction. I'm pretty. I was listening to the 8-bit version that you sent through today, and I thought that was it was very funny. Right, where are we going? So, okay, we've got our vector of static tile sources. So I need a few other things now because I don't have an editor for a static tile source. That's, I guess, something else we need to add. I've got an editor for my asset pack. Now, the editor for the static tile source isn't anything, right? It's just going to be an image view with a grid, and that's it. All it's really there for is to specify that image and specify the dimensions of that grid. So this would actually be quite a simple editor to make. So I'm going to add a new class, and we'll call this one editor static tile source. Wahey. There we are. And I'm going to just sort of steal a bit of the code from up here. Oh, it's put all the files in the wrong place. Let me just drag those into... So I don't like actually having all my headers and CPP files separate. I don't find that a comfortable way to navigate around a large project. Keeping them next to each other makes sense to me. Good. I'm glad that. Well, the plan is to work on a bit of an intro video. If there's any cartoon animators in the chat, hit me up on the Discord, just to work on something for it's 20 seconds long, just as a bit of an intro to these streams, and probably some of the YouTube stuff as well. Right, what do we want? So basically, the editor is just going to be a window that we add to the sort of the GUI manager later on. The asset pack one was a bit different because we needed sort of a fairly complicated GUI in the background. It did other things, but in this case, we don't need any of that. So I'm just going to start coding some stuff up, really. So I don't need... I do need all of those bits. I probably don't need that, but I'll keep it in for the time being. So I'm going to take my grid view prototype, and that's what I'm going to basically steal. So grid view is that, it's in navigable. Right, grid view. Navigable static tile source. Right, class. What did I call this? Editor static tile source. Public. What are we calling these things? Edit. 2D. Oh, it's GUI navigable, isn't it? Yes. GUI navigable. Grid view. I'll probably need to pull that in, right? Oh no, that's okay. Good, we're good so far. I'm using IntelliSense to help me debug things here. Add in the default stuff as usual. It's a static tile source. Now, any sort of GUI component in WX widgets needs an owner, so WX widgets. Oh, it's WX window, sorry. Star parent, and also I need to pass in my my graphics context. The graphics context is the things gluing it all together. It's the entry point to the GPU, and given that most of these tools need the GPU, I need to pass that around as well, which is just simply GUI GFX context. Here we are, CTX. And I don't know, do I want to pass in anything else? Yeah, I probably do later on. I'll need to pass in the asset itself, but I've not got that far yet. Right, and we'll just for kicks add in a destructor as well. Alright, sorry. Right. So let's go and get Windows to propagate those. Visual Studio to go and propagate those. There we go. And we'll throw in our default constructor, GUI navigable panel. No, it wasn't. It was grid view, wasn't it? Grid view. And we'll just pass in the parent and the context. There we go. So now we need to change our mainframe to update the tree in such a way that it understands these things. So if I just go to my base work object class down here, I think I've got static tile source as a particular type. I need this sort of reflection for when I'm opening and saving documents. That's the only time I need this reflection, particularly when constructing things. I know I can read this. I need to construct the right class before I then go and fill it full of data. Thank you, Morris. We'll have some some trees and mountains in the background. And yeah, Speedy, I think it's going to be good fun. Right, so to the mainframe. So mainframe is where we need to start adding a few other functions now. So you'll notice there's not very much in here, but I do need to sort of start having some basic ways of sort of creating this static tile source. It's again more sort of boilerplate stuff, but for now let's just have another launcher function. Now remember in the last episode I discussed why do I keep all of these things separate from the events, and it's because it's scriptable later on if necessary. Static tile source. So there may be some information that we need to pass into this. In fact, there'll be the ID, of course. Where is it in the vector in the workspace? Josh Undefined. Hello. You're undefined. Then we need to I keep saying propagate for some reason. We'll need to do the same for here as we're doing up there. So this is creating now another route, which is going to be static tile sources. We'll give it a nice name. Static tile sources. So we may tidy all of these up and rename these sort of things later on. Static tile. Oh, should be sources, I guess. Happy little accidents. That's what it's all about. Hey, Moon. Yeah, I remember. Append item to static tiles. So what I'm doing here, I should probably zoom in a little bit. I've forgotten my roots here. I'm constructing the tree that's seen on the top to at least allow us to view the new work objects that we're putting in, which is a static tile source. And what I'm hopefully demonstrating here is actually adding new stuff. Now we've got a good, robust background sort of system linking all of this together. Actually adding stuff should be reasonably hassle-free. And I was thinking we could create some massive macro where you could just specify the type. Right? You could just specify this, and wham, it just creates everything for you. That's the future of programming. Right? A programmer in the forest. Yeah. Programmers and outside. No, I won't be creating a big macro to do it for me. Hopefully, anybody that's just joined will be thinking, oh, this guy's lost the plot. There's a reason I've lost the plot, and I'm blaming WXWidget's advanced properties. Right, I've completely lost track of what I'm doing. I need to go down now and add into my yes, select work object. There we go. If leaf type, let's add one of these. If leaf type edit 2D work is now static tile source, and that can become vec static tile source. So that's this worker. So I don't need to change any of that because again we're abusing some polymorphism. I'll just tidy these up a bit. Yeah, these should probably be a big switch block and things, and then they will be. That sort of refactoring I don't think is any fuss at all. Do that later. And we had another one for launching the editor, didn't we? There we go. We've not even created the editor, and we'll get to that in a minute. Launch static tile source. Source. And that one. Static tile source. Now, we've got nothing in our launch function at the moment. That's where we have to start thinking about what we're doing. But I'm going to steal a little bit of this. So image asset pack. So we can see the image asset pack, what's it doing is it takes the tabs editor, which is the big set of tabs in the middle of the screen, and simply adds another page to it. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just literally going to copy this again. It may end up that we can refactor some of this too and do a bit of code reuse. But for the time being, just make it work, then make it work well, right? That's the OLC motto. So that's now vec static. Yeah. Tile source and keep these debug things. So yeah, everything kind of changed. Cannot create. Yeah, I don't know. We'll worry about that in a minute. OLC edit 2D editor is now editor. Oh, no, I've not included that. I've not included that, have I? That's in my mainframe.h. What do we feel about adding header files to CPP files in order to try and sort of simplify the compilation? How does that make people feel? Mainframe.h. So I've got my editor for the asset packs. Now I need to include, because the actual this particular class definition has no notion of what an asset pack editor is, nor does why have I not the static tile source? This class doesn't have any knowledge of what those things are. So you could just stick it in the CPP file, but other things might include this class to get definitions. Keep it simple, stupid. I kind of agree. Morris will make WX widgets compile with Inscription. PhD Jacques is dead inside. Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, I tend to do that as well, Standard In. I think I tend to go through these phases where I'll just sort of vomit code into a project and then scoop it all up and shape it into something beautiful, and then vomit all over it again, and then do the same. Sort of an organic way of developing. It's probably not production level stuff at all, but it's fun, and keeps the makes the days go by. Right, where are we up to? We're launching this, aren't we? Yeah. Static editor, but I've forgotten what we've called the thing. Editor static tile source, and there was nothing to actually pass into that. Oh yes, there is. Okay, that's good. That's good. That's good. So this was. So it looks like with the other editor, the asset pack, one of the things I wanted to pass into the constructor was the workspace, and I guess all we need is the workspace. We don't need specifically the workspace, but we do need an ID. Okay, I'm going to do the same then before I forget to do that. I'm going to stick that in here. So we've got you and you. Yeah, I'll just give it the workspace for now. We may end up having to sort of hard code a few things to test this, but we'll see how far we get. We'll just bang you in there as well. Why? Oh, yeah, don't need you. So going back to mainframe, we have now created a way to launch the static tile source. We can name it. What I'm not packing in is an ID this time. And the name of the thing. I guess we do need to give it a friendly name, don't we? Okay. Vec static tile source ID. Do I have a name property for that? I do have a name property. That was clever of me, wasn't it? Okay, good. So in our static tile source editor, oh, not in editor. In our this is where the properties live, right? So the properties live now in the work object itself. The editor is purely a viewer for this, so we'll be able to change the name and things already. Is the plan. But I don't think the populate properties thing Oh, it does. It does. It has some built in. Right. Okay. Click. Let's see how many errors we get. I've definitely forgotten something though. With a lot of changes in a lot of locations. Catch up with some of the chat. Everything is an opportunity for pedantism and language lawyering. Yes. I don't know what we're discussing, but it feels good. Morris, it's okay. It happens so rarely. You can endure with poise. Ugh. Yeah, the compile times are sucking a little bit, and I'm just not used to it. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh no. What have we forgotten? Static tile source undeclared identifier. It is a declared identifier. Static tile source. What have I spelt it something differently after all this? Static tile source is the main. Go back to where the error is. Chara 36413. Hello. We're debugging. Why is this an error? What's going on here? I hope it's not this flipping properties. These were the kind of errors I was getting when messing around with the property thing. It was just falling about all over this. It turned out that this ended up being an error of me not having a destructor in the right place. Declared identifier. It's definitely declared. See, it knows what it is. So it's not a valid template argument for this. Static tile source. Same error twice. Oh, these ones are fun, aren't they? Oh, look how convenient we're at the end of the stream today. Let's see. We'll have a quick look at this. Try and debug what's going on. Right. Okay. I think that's the problem, isn't it? It doesn't actually have a destructor. So not the editor. It's the actual work object for the static tile source. Did I put one in? Oh no, I did put one in. It's got one there. Got one there. Interesting. Yeah, the idea, this is why you don't use IntelliSense for debugging. Your goal is to make a fun game. Well, you know, that's distinct from all the people that want to make tedious, boring games. So that's a good start. Well, we can't just leave it broken. Well, I could. Technically, you know, we're already overrunning the stream time, but because we've had a bit of a collapse, I thought I'd throw in an extra 10 minutes. You can get a lot of help in the Discord. I don't like boring games, no, neither do I. Right, why are we getting this? This is a silly error, isn't it? What kind of silly error is this? Static tiles. Must be something really obvious going on here. Saying it's not defined. It quite clearly is defined. Static tiles. What's that? Is that including something it shouldn't be that I've not tidied up from somewhere else? Oh, it might be actually. Work object. Yeah, I think it is. Work object. Workspace. I think I can take that out. I think it's the double definition. Oh no, I don't think I can take that out, can I? Because the property grid requires workspace. Yeah, I don't think I can take that. This is interesting that you start getting these. It's already too complex for IntelliSense to tangibly understand. I want to make Getting Nothing Done Speedrun Edition. Well, I mean, it's compiling, but I think it's going to fail again. I think it's... Yeah, there's some nastiness going on. This shouldn't technically compile now because there's nothing actually defining what a workspace is here. But it compiled. Right. Thank you, Visual Studio. Yeah. That's reassuring. I don't know what I'm doing. I just don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea. I have no idea. No idea why that should have compiled. Yeah. Well, we'll run it. Will it crash? So in the workspace, so we can see we've not actually got any static tile sources. So we do actually need to go and add one. For now, I'll programmatically just go and add one in on a new project. just to see if we can get the right editor to launch. So when I create a new project, do workspace new. See, I add a thing. Oh, I guess I need to do it this way. Workspace add, but we need to add a static tile source. So we'll go and create that function double quick. There we are. Yeah, no idea why that should have compiled. I will investigate that later on. It shouldn't. One thing I quite like about the Visual Studio refactoring tool now, or at least this sort of assistive development tool, is when it actually inserts the functions, it goes and puts them in sort of lexical sense, as it were. I think it's a better phrase. It puts it in order now. So it used to just sort of ram things at the end of the file, but now it actually puts it in the right place, which means my groupings in my header file. People often ask, why do you use public, protected? Because I like to mentally group those things together, and they just make a nice visual dividing line. So now I want to find the function we've just added, which was, I've already forgotten the name, workspace add static tile source, because I'm just going to steal that code. Now I've got nothing that calls this yet. I've not linked it through to the menu. And it does actually launch this editor. So let's static tile source. Push back tile source. You see, it's nice that we're at this point where we can just copy and paste this new thing in. Right? We're not having to build specific code, and that's a sign that maybe the sort of the back end to all this is kind of coming together. Launch editor. It's not that one anymore. It is what did we call it? Just static. I think everything's just been static tile source, hasn't it? Maybe a big macro to sort this out. It's not the daftest idea, to be honest. Right. So we also then added, where did we add the launching for that? It used to tell me where I've edited the code recently, and I think it kind of does. It's now this sort of black highlighted green section, which I don't like as much. I'd rather that be. I think it changed to blue, which was good. Now, when we call this do construct workspace tree, at the moment it collapses the tree again and loses its place. So that's something that we do need to sort out. The tree control in WX widgets is actually all right, but it needs a bit of manhandling. There we go. It's created a new project and it's added to it a grid view. There's no colors or textures or anything like that because there's nothing. It's all just blank at the moment. But it is actually there. We've not given it a friendly name, so it can't actually add it. But when we clicked on the space there, because it's got no name, it did actually bring up all of the properties. See, we've not had to code that. It's just natural. It's just happening, and we can go and specify all of those. And hopefully these can then start. It doesn't at the moment. I've not implemented that linkage. It can then start to change these things in real time. And what I'm actually going to add, I'm going to do a few more projects. I'm going to add something called spin controls. So you get a little plus and a minus button there, because I think that's more intuitive. Yes, typing in numbers if you know them is great, but if you just want to tweak things, feel things out, actually having a little button you can drag and move around and see the results change in real time is a far more powerful tool. Right, with that, I'm going to say sorry for the crash in the middle of the stream. I'll see if Twitch has any reports on why that happened. But for now, thank you very much. And I'll see you this time next week, 8:30 on Tuesdays UK time. Take care, everybody.